pack your things," Sarah instructed, sliding a glossy brochure across my kitchen island. "The truck comes Saturday." I paused with my coffee mug halfway to my mouth, the steam curling into the morning air. For a fleeting second, I thought it was a joke. But Sarah's face held that familiar, tight expression, the one she wore when she was reorganizing my pantry or telling me my curtains were outdated. My son, Jason, sat beside her, intensely focused, on a speck of dust on the countertop. He didn't look up. "Saturday," I repeated, setting my mug down softly. "Yes, Erica." Sarah nodded, her tone dripping with the kind of forced patience you reserve for a toddler. "We talked about this. Well, Jason and I talked about it. This house is simply too big for you since Arthur passed. My brother Greg is having another baby. His apartment is cramped. They need this place more than you do." I looked at the brochure. It advertised a senior living facility about 40 minutes away. Small rooms, communal dining, scheduled bingo nights. "Greg needs my house," I clarified, keeping my voice entirely flat. "It just makes sense," Jason finally muttered, still avoiding my eyes. "You're getting older, Mom. We're just trying to help you downsize. Sarah already booked the movers. Greg will take over the utility bills starting next week. We'll stay in the master bedroom, and Greg's family can have the rest of the upstairs." They had moved in 6 months ago to save for a down payment. I had cleared out Arthur's old study for them. Now they were dividing up my home like a pie, assigning slices to people who had never washed a single dish in my sink. My first instinct was to scream. I wanted to shake my son and ask him when his spine had turned to jelly. But getting loud only gives people a reason to call you hysterical. "I see," I murmured, stacking the brochure neatly on top of my morning newspaper. Sarah smiled, a victorious little curve of her lips. She thought my silence was submission, but she was about to learn a very hard lesson about how I operate. Sarah spent that afternoon loudly sorting through the living room cabinets. She dragged out my vintage board games and a stack of photo albums, placing them in a cardboard box labeled "Donate." I didn't storm into the room. I didn't pull the box away from her. Instead, I walked into my home office and quietly closed the solid oak door. My husband Arthur had been a practical man, and he taught me to be the same. Love is a beautiful thing, but it doesn't pay the property taxes. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. When Jason and Sarah moved in, I had added Jason as an authorized user on a secondary credit card to help pick up groceries and household supplies. It was supposed to be for milk bread and emergency gas. Recently, that card had been buying artisan coffees, premium streaming subscriptions, and apparently a deposit for a moving truck. I clicked Manage Cards. Then I clicked Remove User. Next, I navigated to the internet provider's portal. Sarah worked from home 3 days a week and spent her evenings scrolling through social media. I changed the Wi-Fi password to a random string of numbers and letters, then rebooted the router. 10 minutes later, a heavy knock hit my office door. "Erica," Sarah called out, jiggling the handle. I had locked it. "The internet is down. I have a Zoom call in 20 minutes. I opened the door, holding a feather duster. "Oh, that's a shame." I replied, my expression perfectly mild. "You might want to use your mobile hotspot." "Can you just call the company?" she demanded, crossing her arms. "I really need it." I canceled the premium package. I lied smoothly. Since I'm downsizing, I decided I don't need high-speed internet. I have to start preparing for my new life, right? Sarah's mouth opened, then closed. She couldn't argue without sounding ungrateful, and she knew it. She spun around and marched back to the living room. I locked the door again. I picked up my phone and dialed a local number. I didn't need complicated legal advice. I just needed a professional who worked with metal and brass. "Yes, hello." I spoke quietly into the receiver. I need to schedule a residential lock change. Friday evening if possible. By Wednesday, the atmosphere in the house was thick with unspoken tension. Jason was starting to realize that his free ride was hitting a few speed bumps. He cornered me in the kitchen while I was making a sandwich. "Mom, my card was declined at the grocery store this morning. It was really embarrassing." "Did the bank freeze your account?" "No," I answered, slicing a tomato. "I removed your name from the card, Jason." He blinked, clearly stunned. "What? Why? How are we supposed to buy groceries?" "With your own money," I suggested, placing the tomato on my bread. "You both have full-time jobs. Since you're managing my transition to a senior facility so efficiently, I assumed you were completely financially independent." Jason ran a hand through his hair, looking genuinely distressed. "Mom, you know we're trying to save, and Greg is tight on cash right now with the new baby coming. We were counting on that card for a little cushion this month." "My finances are not your cushion," I stated, wiping down the counter. "And frankly, Jason, it takes a lot of nerve to spend my money while planning to throw me out of my own home." "We aren't throwing you out," he protested, his voice cracking slightly. "We're upgrading your lifestyle. That apartment complex has a pool." "I have a bathtub," I replied. "And I like it just fine." Sarah walked in, then carrying a stack of my winter coats. "Erica, I'm boxing these up. You won't need heavy coats in that new place. They keep the heating cranked up for the elderly." I stopped wiping the counter. I looked at the coats, then at Sarah. I didn't yell. I simply walked over, took the coats out of her arms, and carried them back to the hall closet. "Hey," Sarah snapped. "I'm trying to keep us on schedule. The truck comes Saturday at 8 a.m. We don't have time for you to be stubborn." I turned back to her, my voice perfectly level. "You're right, Sarah. We don't have time." I left them standing in the kitchen. My preparations were only half done, and I had a lot of boxes to find. Thursday morning, the house was unusually quiet. Sarah and Jason had gone to work, leaving me alone with the cardboard boxes they had stacked in the hallway. They had brought home 30 medium-sized boxes. They were meant for my dishes, my books, and the life I had built with Arthur over 40 years. I looked at the neatly folded packing tape. Then I walked upstairs to the master bedroom, the room Jason and Sarah had claimed as their own when they moved in. It was a mess. Clothes draped over chairs, half-empty water bottles on the nightstands, Sarah's expensive skincare products crowding my antique vanity. I grabbed a stack of flattened boxes from the hallway and dragged them into their bedroom. I didn't damage anything. I didn't break a single bottle or rip a single shirt. I packed with the careful, methodical precision of a mother who had packed her son for college a decade ago. I folded Sarah's designer jeans. I wrapped Jason's gaming console in bubble wrap. I boxed up their shoes, their toiletries, and their framed photos. It took me 5 hours. By 3 o'clock, the master bedroom was entirely empty, stripped back to the bare mattress and the plain wooden furniture Arthur and I had bought in our 20s. I stacked their taped-up boxes in the corner of the room. Then I went down to the basement and did the same with the overflow of junk they had stored down there. My back ached, and my hands were dry from the cardboard, but my mind had never been clearer. When I finished, I sat on the porch with a glass of iced tea. I watched the neighborhood kids ride their bikes down the street. It was a beautiful, crisp afternoon. My phone buzzed. It was an automated text message from the moving company Sarah had hired, confirming the arrival of a 15-foot truck at 8 a.m. on Saturday. I smiled, took a sip of my tea, and replied to the text. Confirmed. See you Saturday. The pieces were falling into place exactly as they needed to. They just didn't realize they were playing on my board. Friday evening was a celebration, or at least that's what Sarah called it. She had organized a dinner at a fancy Italian restaurant downtown, with Jason, her brother Greg, and Greg's pregnant wife. "We won't be back until late," Sarah announced, touching up her lipstick in the hallway mirror. "We're toasting to the new house arrangements. You'll be fine here, packing the kitchen." "Right. Erica." "I'll manage," I answered, sitting in my armchair with a book. Jason lingered by the door, shifting his weight. "Mom, you know this is for the best, right? Greg's a good guy. He'll take care of the lawn." "Have a nice dinner, Jason," I replied, turning a page. The moment their car pulled out of the driveway, I put my book down. I didn't have a second to waste. I dragged the boxes I had packed yesterday, Jason and Sarah's entire lives, down the stairs. It took several trips, and my knees protested, but adrenaline is a wonderful fuel. I moved every single box into the detached garage at the end of the driveway. Once the house was completely clear of their belongings, I heard a van pull up to the curb. It was the locksmith. "Evening, ma'am," the man greeted, carrying his heavy tool bag. "Front and back doors, you said." "Yes, please." I nodded. "And the side door leading to the patio." He worked quickly and efficiently. Within an hour, every lock on the house had been swapped. The heavy, satisfying click of the new deadbolt sliding into place was the best sound I had heard all week. I paid the man in cash and thanked him. I walked through my silent house. It felt lighter. The oppressive weight of their entitlement was locked outside in the garage. I went to the kitchen, made myself a cup of chamomile tea, and sat at the island. I placed the 3 shiny new keys on the countertop. The clock on the microwave read 10:15 p.m. They would be home soon. I turned off the main lights, leaving only the porch light glowing, and waited in the quiet dark. At 10:45 p.m., headlights swept across the living room window. I heard the car doors slam, followed by Sarah's high-pitched laugh and Jason's lower voice. Footsteps approached the front porch. I heard the metallic clinking of Jason's keychain. A key slid into the lock. He turned it. It caught. He jiggled it. He pushed his shoulder against the wood. "This stupid door!" Jason muttered, his voice carrying through the glass pane. "It's stuck again. Just push harder, Jay." Sarah sighed. "It's freezing out here." He tried again. Then a heavy knock echoed through the house. "Mom, are you awake? The door is jammed." I stood up, walked into the hallway, and flicked on the entryway light. I approached the door, but I didn't touch the deadbolt. I simply looked through the small glass panel at the top. Jason looked relieved to see me. "Mom, open up. My key isn't working." "I know." I spoke loudly enough for them to hear. "The locks were changed tonight." Sarah pushed past Jason, pressing her face close to the glass. "What are you talking about? Open the door. Erica, it's late. You don't live here anymore." I stated my voice, calm and steady. "I packed your belongings. They are in the garage. The side door to the garage is unlocked." Jason stared at me, his eyes wide with confusion. "Mom, stop playing games. Let us in. We have to sleep." "You can sleep wherever you like," I answered, "but not in my house. You decided I needed to move out to accommodate Greg. I decided I prefer to stay, since you are so eager to leave. Your transition starts tonight." "You can't do this," Sarah shrieked, hitting the door with the flat of her hand. "All my stuff is in there." "Your stuff is in the garage in clearly labeled boxes," I corrected her. "You have your car. I suggest you find a hotel. Good night, Jason." I turned off the entryway light, leaving them standing on the porch in the glow of the street lamp. I walked upstairs to my bedroom, got into my comfortable bed, and fell asleep to the distant muffled sound of Sarah yelling at Jason in the driveway. I woke up at 6:30 a.m. feeling remarkably rested. I brewed my coffee and looked out the kitchen window. Jason's car was gone. They had eventually given up and left the driveway. But today was Saturday. The main event was still on the schedule. At exactly 7:45 a.m., a large, yellow moving truck rumbled down my quiet street and parked against the curb. A moment later, Jason's car pulled up behind it. He and Sarah stepped out looking exhausted and furious. Behind them, a third car arrived. It was Greg, Sarah's brother, looking entirely bewildered. I unlocked the front door and stepped out onto the porch, a steaming mug of coffee in my hand. A burly man with a clipboard jumped down from the truck cab and approached the house. "Morning, I'm looking for a Sarah. We have a work order for a full house pack-up and move." Sarah marched up the walkway, her face flushed with anger. "Yes, that's me. But there's been a slight change of plans. This woman," she pointed a shaking finger at me, "locked us out of our own house last night." "Your mother-in-law's house," I corrected mildly from the porch. The foreman looked between us, scratching his beard. "Look, lady, I just moved boxes. Do you want us to start loading or not?" "Yes," Sarah demanded. "Go inside and start packing the kitchen." "No," I spoke up, stepping down the stairs. "You will not enter that house." "She can't stop you," Sarah yelled. "I paid the deposit." I looked at the foreman. "My name is Erica West. I am the sole owner of this property. My name is on the deed. If you cross that threshold without my permission, you are trespassing." The foreman held up his hands, taking a large step back. "Whoa, okay. We don't do family disputes. If the homeowner says no, we don't go in. Sorry, miss. I have to cancel the job." "Wait!" Jason finally spoke up, looking panicked. "We need this truck. All our stuff is in the garage." I took a sip of my coffee. "Well, that sounds like a solvable problem." Sarah was vibrating with rage. Greg, her brother, stepped forward, looking confused. "Sarah, what's going on? You said the house was ready for us to move into today." "It is," Sarah insisted. "She's just having an episode." I ignored her completely and turned my attention back to the moving foreman. "Excuse me, sir. They paid a deposit for the truck and a crew today, correct?" "Yeah," the man nodded warily. 4 hours minimum." "Excellent," I said. "As Jason mentioned, all of their belongings are boxed and currently sitting in that detached garage. They need those boxes moved." I walked over to the garage, pulled the side door open, and hit the button to raise the main door. The morning sun illuminated 30 neatly stacked, taped-up boxes alongside their suitcases and golf clubs. Jason stared at the pile. "You packed everything?" he whispered, sounding more shocked than angry. "I folded your jeans, Jason," I replied softly. "Just like I used to." I turned back to the foreman. "There is the cargo. They have the truck. You can load it right here from the driveway without stepping foot in my house." "Where are we supposed to take it?" Sarah screeched. "We don't have an apartment. We gave up our lease to move in here." "That was remarkably short-sighted of you," I noted. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small silver key and a printed piece of paper. I walked over to Jason and pressed them into his palm. "What is this?" he asked, looking down at the key. "It's a storage unit on Route 9, I explained calmly. "I rented it yesterday in your name. The first 30 days are paid in full. The receipt and the unit number are on that paper." Sarah snatched the paper from Jason's hand. "A storage unit. Are you insane? Where are we going to sleep?" "That," I said, looking directly into Sarah's eyes, "is none of my business." The foreman whistled sharply, signaling his crew. "All right, boys, change of plans. Load the stuff from the garage. Destination is a storage facility on Route 9. The movers sprang into action, quickly grabbing boxes and dollies. They were paid by the hour. They didn't care whose house it was, as long as they had clear instructions and a clear path. Greg stood in the driveway, crossing his arms. He looked at his sister. Sarah, you told me she agreed to this. You told me the house was yours. It basically is, Sarah argued, her voice cracking. Arthur died. She can't manage it alone. I managed just fine, I interjected smoothly. I managed to pack your entire life in 5 hours, secure a storage unit, and change the locks all while you were eating expensive pasta on my dime. Greg shook his head, looking embarrassed. I'm not getting involved in this. Come on, he muttered to his pregnant wife. Let's go back to our apartment. They got into their car and drove away without looking back. Jason stood perfectly still, watching the movers empty the garage. The reality of the situation was finally sinking in. He wasn't getting the house. He wasn't getting the master bedroom. He was getting a storage unit on the highway. Mom, he finally said, his voice trembling slightly. You're really kicking me out. You tried to kick me out first, Jason. I reminded him gently. I just packed faster. We're family, he pleaded weakly. Family respects boundaries, I replied. Family asks. Family does not hand their mother a brochure and schedule her eviction. You let her treat me like a burden in the home I built. You made your choice. The last box was loaded. The foreman slammed the back of the truck down and locked it. All right, we're heading to Route 9. You folks following us? Jason looked at the truck, then at Sarah, who was crying angry tears by their car. He looked back at me one last time. He didn't find any hesitation in my face. He turned, walked to his car, and got in. I stood on the porch and watched them drive away, trailing the yellow moving truck. A month passed. The weather turned warmer, and I spent my mornings planting hydrangeas in the front garden. The house was incredibly peaceful. There were no heavy footsteps above my head at midnight. No passive-aggressive comments about my cooking. No one reorganizing my pantry or spending my money on artisanal coffee. I had reclaimed my space, and with it, my peace of mind. Jason tried to call after 2 weeks. I let it go to voicemail. When he called a week later, I finally picked up. Mom. He sounded hesitant, small. Hi. Hello, Jason. I answered, wiping soil from my gardening gloves. We found a small apartment downtown, he said. It's cramped and the rent is high, but we're making it work. I'm glad to hear you found shelter, I said evenly. There was a long pause on the line. I'm sorry, Mom. Really. Things just got out of hand. Sarah was stressed about Greg, and I just went along with it. I shouldn't have. No, you shouldn't have, I agreed. Can we come over for Sunday dinner? He asked, trying to sound hopeful. Like we used to. I looked at my clean kitchen, the new locks on the doors, the life I had successfully protected. I loved my son. But love does not require you to be a doormat. No, Jason, I said gently. You and Sarah are not welcome at the house. Mom, please. We want to fix this. We can meet for coffee on Tuesday at the diner on Main Street, I offered. At noon. Just you and me. But my home is my sanctuary now. It is no longer open for your convenience. He stayed quiet for a long time. Finally, he sighed. Okay. Tuesday at noon. I hung up the phone. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel sad. I felt like a woman who had drawn a line in the sand and built a brick wall right on top of it. I walked inside, locked my secure, heavy front door, and went to make a fresh pot of coffee. The brochure for the senior home was long gone, thrown out with the rest of the trash. I was exactly where I belonged,